is to develop capital improvement planning and budgets for council to consider that are maximizing the available resources you have into capital projects based on is it a public safety issue? Should obviously be paramount. Is it an economic development issue? Will investment in this new street, this new water line, this broadband fiber project, is it going to lead to additional jobs, additional economic development? You have to ask those questions now instead of just in past years. Water department got so much money to replace water lines. You guys tell me where you need to fix them, and you know, I'll give you the same thing I gave you last year plus 5%. Those times are a lot different now. You have to justify your expenses. The things you spent money on 5 years ago that was a given, you really need to show justification of why you're spending it this year. And a lot of difficulty you have now in organizations that are not ready for this kind of change is the difficulty in getting elected officials to start thinking, well, we've always done it that way. We've always, we don't like to raise water rates. We don't like to raise sewer rates because, you know, I got this lady goes to church with me, and she's always on me about how much she pays water bill. I just don't want to mess with water rates this year. All right, well, that means that you're going to have to subsidize that from the general fund. And because you've got a commodity like utilities that you're not willing to raise those rates on as a paid for use, you're having to dip into your general fund, which means that's less money for police officers, that's less money for fire trucks, it's less money for sanitation workers. So that's a real challenge we've got now. Another challenge I think that we face now is getting people into the profession. Is this you have to have the right mindset to get in this line of work. If you get in this line of work to be popular, to be somebody's friend, it's not going to happen. You're going to have to say no. You're going to have to be the bad guy. Your name's going to be the headline. Your face is going to be on the front page, and there's going to be petitions, and there's going to be angry calls to the local radio station. But you have to. The important thing is that you make your decision, your recommendations, based on sound fact, and not politics, and make your recommendations based on fairness. You're not going to please everyone all the time. The thing I always like to say when people ask me, as city manager, how are things going? My reply is, depends on who you ask and what day, because things do change. You can't personalize the work either. You're going to have people that are going to be upset with you from time to time. Don't write them off, because there may be another issue 6 months down the line that you're going to find out they may be one of your biggest advocates. So the difficulty in trying to in my case, most of my work has been in communities less than 10,000. But still, in a community of that size, trying to create a vision and trying to look at issues and impacts of policy, not only short term but long term, and getting that consensus amongst your citizens, amongst your employees, and amongst your town or city council, it's tough work. It's not for the faint of heart, and quite frankly, it's probably not your next step as you graduate. My career advice to you is try to find yourself an organization that or a community that you feel comfortable with. Get to know that community. Find the manager or department head, whoever's hired you. Seek out advice. Seek out seek their counsel out. Learn from the people that you're going to be working for at your next step, at your first professional level. And I can guarantee you too, I've done it myself when I first started out, and I got in, and I would hear people around the water cooler talking about, oh, that city manager, what's he thinking of? He just doesn't appreciate employees, or what's he thinking about doing this, or he's placating this council member. So when you start walking in those sets of shoes, you see things a lot different. And my advice to you is, before you step into that management position, if that's your goal, learn as much as you can. Develop a network of peers. I can't believe the size of this group compared to when Diane and I were in. Yeah, it sure has. And, stay together. Lean on each other as you go your separate ways. You're going to find out that you all as professionals are probably going to grow together. And so keep those contacts up. I think the last thing I'm going to talk about is the importance of regionalism. When you talk about austere times, particularly when you're trying to seek a limited amount of grant funds, not how much grant money it used to be. I don't know what the case is in Tennessee, but I know in Virginia, if you're a sole city or sole town or sole county trying to get a substantial amount of funds, your chances are going to be a lot less than if you are partnering in with a neighboring community or neighboring county or a planning district or a utility authority and trying to do a project on a regional basis. Regionalism it's no longer a trend of the future, it's here. We live in a global environment. People, when they decide where to live, where to locate their business, they could care less what a corporate limit is. They want to make sure that there's infrastructure and services and a workforce in place that's going to be able to make their business successful or their quality of life something that they want. And so we have, in the profession, had to drop a lot of the territorial fences that we oftentimes built because of competition with for these limited sources, and we find that by working together with other entities of government, you're much more successful in obtaining these grants. The last thing is ethics. Number one, don't ever let your reputation be smeared, or your if any of you are not already members of the ICMA student membership, I would encourage you to do so. It's a great organization. They're very much driven by a code of ethics and standards of principles that I think it's just everything I need to learn about city management I learned through ICMA, so I'll put a plug in for them.
Thank you, Keith. I appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Ms. Jeanette Scalf, who comes from our neighbor to the north, Kingsport. She's going to talk about community and economic development.
Thank you, Dr. Felker. This will probably be a little bit different. Everybody stand up and kind of shake off.
This is stretch.
Yes, I mean, you know.
West America.
But the thing is, you know, kind of shake it off. These guys have given you the bleak picture of city management and planning and everything that they said is true, but it's also, we have to look on what's on the horizon, and we have to plan. And a lot of what I do is look at a lot of the things that they're talking about and figure out partnerships between private and public and figure out solutions. Y'all can sit down, but I just figured everybody ought to shake it off. I am with the city of Kingsport, and this is a new position to the city of Kingsport, thanks to a visionary city council and city manager. In seeing that
a lot of the things that's been described already is things that are traditional to city management and to running cities and taking care of things. However, it requires short-term and long-term planning. And when they created this position, I don't know that they were, they left room to be able to use it as needed. And what we have to do as municipalities and communities is look beyond the 6 feet of mud and muck that we're plowing through right now and put things in the pipeline of, okay, this isn't going to last forever, and what can we do? And how can we pull ourselves out of this? And that, very simply put, is a lot of what I do. I look for non-traditional ways to bring a business or keep a business. I troubleshoot, I facilitate, and I do that from the bringing private business and the public together, but I also do that within, I'm on the management team for the city of Kingsport, and we're a team, we work together. And so therefore, you know, one may be having a public works project and needing to put a roundabout transportation thing in, and well, there's a business in the middle of it, and it's one of the longest standing businesses in the city, and where are we gonna put them, and how are we gonna keep them happy, and that sort of thing. So I troubleshoot those things. And looking at having dollars to be able to provide services, that's a lot of what people think economic development is. Most people used to think it was just industrial recruitment, but you got to have people there, you got to have jobs for those people to earn money, to be able to spend as well as pay taxes, and figuring out how all of these things work together. The topic was, you know, planning and managing in times of austerity. Times are difficult, but you cannot keep your eyes on the ground. And that's a lot of what I do, is trying to help facilitate ways for us to look beyond just what we're in, and how to get and come up with ways to get us there. And it's not me. I'm kind of the matchmaker. Do a lot of listening, a lot of networking. And somebody mentioned regionalism. I don't know how many of you are traditionally from this area, but this area traditionally does not play well with their sisters and brothers. Johnson City, Kingsport, and Bristol, there's never been a true principal city to arise. And
Principal city.
everyone thinks they're the own, each one is their own principal city. Johnson City thinks they are, Kingsport thinks they are, Bristol thinks they are. I work for the city of Kingsport. I live in Elizabethton. When people say, well, you're just all about the city of Kingsport, no, I'm about making this community a better place for all of us to live. They've addressed some of the infrastructure issues and that sort of thing. We do have issues in Kingsport, but it's not, I don't want to say not as bleak, but maybe it's just a different style of addressing some of those issues. And I enjoy being a part of that management team. I enjoy what I do. People tell me don't take it personal. It's never personal. It's just business. You don't take it personal in that manner, but this is the community in which I live, in which my kids are going to that school. And if there's not funding for that school because there's not enough tax money, because there's not enough people having jobs to pay taxes, that's personal to me. This is my community. What else? Prior to being with the city of Kingsport, I worked at Network Sullivan Partnership. And that was Sullivan County, Kingsport, Bristol, and Bluff City as an economic development partnership. Politics plays a huge role in a lot of things, and people do not want to sometimes stare that in the eye and call it what it is. You may not always agree with your neighbor in what they say. However, you always find common ground to move forward because you're both looking for what's best for your community. You walk a line between being a public servant, a true public servant, and getting caught in some of the power and the egos and the struggles. I've been in the profession for almost 5 years. In terms of economic development, I am a rookie, I'm a newbie, I am green as they come. 5 years may not, 5 years is a long time as far as getting out of school and wanting to go to work. But there is a vast majority of those that are in my profession that have been doing this for 30 years or more. And they are retiring. They are going to the house. And there has to be people to step in that want to grab a hold of this ugly bull in the ring that's probably going to whoop your butt and try and make a difference and try and make your community a better place. It's not always easy, but it's very rewarding. And as far as rewarding, I'd say to you, if you are an instant gratification person, do not go into city management, public administration of any kind. Example, Metaview expansion. A lot of people found out about the convention center expanding just a short while ago, but that's been in the works for 6-7 years. Actually in the works. There were people talking about it and planting seeds and planning for it before then. That's one example. If you are into instant gratification, this is not the place. One of my fellow colleagues mentioned if you are thin-skinned, this is not the place. But I will say, a lot of people forget this is a profession. This isn't something you just happen into and wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to, do economic development and recruit people to bring their business or help them stay in business here or manage a city, And I think it was you that talked about ethics. You look around the room, the people that are sitting here with you, 5, 10 years, they're going to Google you. May even only take one. They're going to Facebook you if you haven't stayed in touch. That's the generation we're in. And I know of people that were in the program when I first started in that I've established relationships with. My job is a lot about resources, that any job you have in public management is going to be about resources because they are very limited and you need to know how to get a hold of some resources. And when I say resources, I'm not talking just money. He comes to me and says, we got this nasty brownfield over here, and we got a company that wants to come, but how do we clean it up? Well, you know, I did my thesis on brownfields, and I went to this brownfields conference a couple of years ago, and I got a card. And let me call that guy, because he said if I ever had anything, be true to who you are. Don't compromise your ethics. And if you were an unethical person, or you try and slide to the side a little bit, and oh, nobody will know, and it won't come back coming. If you are working as a public servant in the public, I guarantee you, they will find it, and they will exploit it for their own good. So you must stay true to your ethics, and stay true to yourself. Don't put yourself in compromising positions, because yeah, it'll cost you your job, cost you your reputation, but it is going to give your community that you've been working for a black eye that may take years to recover from. I think that's all I've got.
Can I respond to one thing that you said? The comment about no participation or with regionalism with the cities. I just want everybody to know that's not entirely correct. I will agree with you, there are some issues where there's some turf battles with the three cities. But we also have a home consortium that's made up of representatives of all three cities in Washington County, Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia, Kingsport, and Jonesboro and Johnson City. And they have representatives they meet once a month, and they determine what's to be done with this grant funds they get from the federal government. So it's not always bad between the three cities. That is a good example of regional cooperation and collaboration and how we work
I'm not saying
together.
that there's not any cooperation.
Okay.
And I understand, you know, under the grant situation.
But the mayors
there is
and the city managers are members of this board.
I understand, and I work directly for city managers. The thing is what I was intending to say is that traditionally, in this region, nobody gets along. Everybody wants what they want.
That's not uncommon just for this region.
And it's
too.
not no, it's not.
It goes in other states too.
It goes everywhere, everywhere. It's everywhere. And there are pockets of cooperation. There has been miles of inroads made now versus 30 years ago. But there is still extremely a huge amount of work to do. One of the mottos that I was taught as part of the partnership, and actually when I become a part of the management team in Kingsport, collaborate everywhere you can and compete where you have to.
I think generally governments are starting to learn they need to work together, but give you an example how bad it is. When I was town manager of the town of Tazewell, Southwest Virginia, Coalfields, there were 4 different high schools in Tazewell County, and I had a member on my town council that would not attend a meeting if the town of Richlands was involved, because their football team cheated in a game 20 years earlier when he was in school, and he would have nothing to do with that town. That's the truth.
Well, perhaps we can take this up more, extensively when we get into the question and answer session. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Jason Tinsley, who comes to us from Habersham County, Georgia, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, is the headlands of the Chattahoochee River.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, how do I know that's interesting fact? Because I went to in my junior year to Sidney Lanier High School in Montgomery, Alabama, and we had to learn all of his poetry. And one of Sidney Lanier's favorite poems was Song of the Chattahoochee, and it begins, out of the hills of Habersham, down through the valleys of Fall, I hurry amain to reach the plain, run the rapid and leap the fall. Well, I don't think Jason is going to wax poetical here, but I hope he does. But he's going to tell us about being an assistant county manager in a Georgia county in times of austerity. Jason. Floor is yours.
Yeah. All the comments have been great so far. I'm going to keep it on the up level because to me, all those, even though all those issues are very frustrating, they're all very fun to deal with at the same time. And I figured I'd just take it from a different approach. I'll just tell you what my day was like Tuesday, and then you can get an idea of what my job is. You know, we found out Tuesday we got approved for our FAA grant to finish our parallel taxiway on our runway at the county airport, which is where our industrial park is, which it's a fair industrial park. It's not exactly the model of success as far as industrial recruitment. That same day, I got a call from 2 commissioners saying that the folks from Northeast Georgia Soccer were out at the fairgrounds. They use our pavilion to do indoor soccer in the wintertime. That there were hogs running around. So, in the same day, and that became earlier this week known between a couple of commissioners, myself, and my boss, the county manager, as Hoggate. So we were something to do with the miscommunication with the school board, and anyway, there were 6 hogs running around the fairgrounds. At the same time, there was little children trying to do indoor soccer, and hogs are mean. I don't have too much experience with them, but when I went up there, I didn't feel safe. So, and everything in between. So, from the county airport in the morning to hogs in the afternoon, and all the different items that almost everyone else has discussed. That's really what the job was like. I'm a little more insulated than some of the other folks because I'm the number 2 person, so I can just push my manager. Her name is Jane Ann. She's our first ever female manager, and she's finding her way. She's doing a good job, but you can just sort of push her into the wolves and say, "Go get him, Jane Ann." Here's all my great ideas. Go convince the board we need to do all this stuff. And so I enjoy that one step down, and it's been. I often thought that I probably would have been manager of a small place by now, and I'm glad I'm not, because I still, like when it comes to a lot of these issues, that I learn them as I go. And although being precise is good, in my job, you have to be able to shoot from the hip every once in a while too. So I'm learning that, and I'll take you back. My career really started in Wise County, Virginia. For their first ever out-of-county manager, I worked on my project and did my internship with him, and then after I graduated this program, he made a position out of another position for me, and I became the assistant to the administrator in Wise County. And after a bad election, 6 or 7 months later, he was fired. So I decided to leave when he left, and that took me to Leon County, Florida, which is a county of about 500,000 people. And I worked in the budget office there, so I went from a small, fairly rural county to Tallahassee, where at that point, we didn't even know what to do with the money. It was coming in so fast, and almost embarrassing to say that I worked in an organization like that, because there were, I worked for a budget manager and an assistant county administrator that would, ultimately just try to find projects to throw this cash at, and here we are. They had a taxpayer revolt in Florida, and luckily enough, I was able to take the job in Georgia, moved up. So anyway, the budget office in Florida. Now I'm in Georgia. I started as the finance director there with a promise to become the assistant manager, which I have now. And since lost my manager there too, so I'm on my second one. And that was started 7 years ago. So, in times of austerity, which I was joking with them, I had to look up what that meant when I got the email because I didn't know. I kind of want to jump on the regionalism bit, because what's interesting about the county I live in, there's about 45,000 people in the county. We have 7 cities. The other interesting part is about 75% of the folks live in the unincorporated area. So we live in an unsustainable community, and we all know it. We have 6 sewer systems, 7 water systems, 6 chiefs of police, 1 sheriff, 5 fire chiefs. I'm just throwing city and county all in together. You know, and these cities are just very tiny. You know, sometimes those, you know, most of them just have one cop. You know, and they run a little bit of water business here and there, and then we have one full service city. You know, and what we're trying to do now is trying to figure out who's going to give up what turf, and we know we have to do it. But right, you know, as of, you know, we started on this project over 12 months, we've got nothing done, nothing. It's just, you know, these cities were all chartered 100 years ago, and, you know, 100 years ago in Georgia, you didn't need much to charter a city. You know, I think a couple of them realized that they either need to merge with another city or go away completely. I mean, because in two of them, you wouldn't even know you were in an incorporated area at all. So the regionalism part is important, you know, and the turf it's a big deal because these mayorships, these are big deals for these folks, you know. And we also have the added bit that we're now about 25% Atlanta refugees and 75% homegrown folks. And we're getting very diverse, you know. We're kind of a half ag on one side of the county, but we've got an indoor county-run aquatic center on the other side with indoor soccer and all kinds of other cool stuff. So, but you know, as we're learning, you know, we went through the last 3 budget cycles without a tax increase on the county side. Everyone knows that raising taxes, you know, I'm speaking for my politicians here, you know, is probably the wrong thing to do right now. And, you know, it's really forcing us into this game with all of our, you know, what I don't think any Georgians are here, we call our stepsisters our 7 cities. But, you know, we know it's time to play nice, they know it's time to play nice, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to do it, you know. And sometimes it makes a lot more sense to staff than it does to elected officials.
Yeah.
Because I know what the county does well, and I know what we do poorly. We do water poorly. I don't want to recording this, but don't share it with anyone.
Directly
But it's really good not to be the lightning rod.
Yeah. We do, you know, we do EMS and fire. You know, that's something that we've been trying to convince our cities to let go of and contract with us to do it. You know, because we know we can do it better than they can. But there's things that they do. They do, in some cases, recreation better than we do. In some cases, they do economic development better than we do. And they certainly do utilities better than we do. We even run our own county utility system, so throw in ours on top of all theirs. So, I mean, we just look at it as an opportunity. You know, we're really forced to concentrate on, you know, where's our water coming from. If you know anything about North Georgia, you know, we're unsustainable on the waterfront. You know, and when it comes to taxes, you know, you know, what are you getting for your tax dollars in Habersham? In a lot of cases, you know, we could be doing better, and I think the citizens know it. All the elected officials know it, and now it's time to, you know, to get in there and get it done. And what we're trying to convince our elected officials to do is to, you know, start from the citizens and work up, find out what's important to them. We've gone through a couple of very quiet budget cycles. When you reel the tax rate back, you have 2 or 3 people at the hearing, and they're like, "Oh, good job, everyone's doing a good job, not raising our taxes." But like everyone said, that's unsustainable. We're pay freeze right now. I've implemented 7 furlough days. That's all temporary. I mean, you keep that up, everyone's going to quit.
Right.
You know, you know, and then on the economic development front, you know, we have one city that has their own economic development director. The county has one, and we also have a development authority through the county. So we're learning to get along there. I mean, and we all want to do it, but you know, it's just, you know, these forms of government are so old, especially county. You know, we should have, county governments should have streamlined a long time ago. We have an elected sheriff, an elected tax collector, an elected magistrate, probate, you know, and although we're responsible for their budgets, you know, they run their show, their little part of the show, the way they want it. You know, and the commissioners are kind of stuck with the rest. So we're out there, we're looking, we're trying to figure out what to do. But, you know, have no fear, it is a lot of fun. And, you know, sometimes pigs running around in fairgrounds is like is a welcome problem.
Diversion.
Yeah. You know, and it just goes to show you that, you always have to have your eye on what's going on in the future. But, it's putting out fires, and it's how to be able to put the fires out but not lose sight of where you're going at the same time. So, but, I've made it to this position, basically through finance. And with my eye always on management, but the finance jobs always seem to be open. So I forced myself to learn it and know it. I became a finance director. I had no business being a finance director, but someone trusted me enough. I learned it. I know it now. I'm comfortable with it. Now I'm on the management side, and and I'm enjoying it. I really am. Do I think I'm going to do it for the rest of my life? Absolutely not. I just don't. I think the burnout rate at this point is super high, and a lot of folks are losing their jobs because commissioners or councilmen don't want to hear the word no. They just want to say, they're looking for yes men right now because they're panicking, in my opinion. And that objective voice is, I think, it's not being heard right now. But I think it will be heard again. It's just, we got to find a way to bridge ourselves through the next few years. But on the other side of it, we have to have a plan on what on earth we're going to do when it's over. Because if we don't change, then we're going to be right back here or worse, probably worse. So I'm stopping now.
Thank you, Jay.
Can I just say something? Talk about your politicians like my politicians. You can't raise taxes now. It's bad for the economy. 5-6 years ago, when the economy was just going out of control, you never heard any politicians then saying raise taxes then would have put the economy in a slump. It's you hear it, I hear it. It's the same worn out song. I mean, you got, there's services you have to pay for. No one likes to pay for it. By hiding your head in the sand, however, politicians that won't understand that the cost of doing government increases every year with inflation, just as the cost of doing a business, just as huge corporations' costs go up, just as the same mom and pop costs go up. And if you could get those folks to run the government like they would run their own small business, you realize that little incremental increases, regular incremental increases that keep up with inflation, is a far cry better sight than just trying to ignore the problem until you've reached a physical canyon and realize that to get out, there's a lot of work to do to get out. And we didn't put ourselves in this shape as local governments or state or federal governments like this overnight. This has been a long-standing fiscal policy in this country that has worked its way down to the grassroots of Joe citizen, that government is bad, government is evil, they're wasting my tax dollars. And until I think there can be a change in that, if somehow we could educate our citizens, the next wave of kids coming out of school, about the importance of maintaining the republic that we have and what it takes as a citizen to keep our society functioning, we're not going to change that. It's going to get worse. I've got another few years to go before I can retire. My heart really goes after those just getting in the profession. It's going to be tough. You're going to have a lot of challenge. The alternative, give up, that's not an option. We've got to continue. We have to keep finding good people in this profession to keep the fight up. And that's not only, when I say bring good people in, that's not just appointed officials, that's elected officials too. We have to educate our public on what sometimes being fiscally responsible means that you've got to make some very unpopular decisions. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, You've heard 5 very interesting points of view coming from diversity of communities. One thing all these ladies and gentlemen have in common was once upon a time most of them were sitting right where you are today. When I came here 21 years ago, we instituted this sort of spring symposium. It's now happening, I guess, in the fall, with the intention of basically trying to, first of all, highlight the MCM program, and second of all, attempting to basically start a dialogue on the issue of regional cooperation. And as you can see, these ladies and gentlemen are continuing this sort of dialogue, and I hope that in the future we will hear more along these lines. At this point, I would like to open up the discussion to all of you. And I'm sure you have questions that you'd like to pose to our panel of experts here. So please, ask questions. Anyone?
I have a question. The guy in the middle there, I didn't catch your name. I apologize. I know you're assistant manager. What is it? Okay, Jason Tinsley. I'm Tammy Carr, and I have a question for you. When the city management job opened and you changed city managers, why didn't you go after that job? You just didn't want it?
It was it was really more to do with personal relations than anything. It's county, by the way, not city.
Oh, okay.
Don't insult me, please. No, really what it was is I had taken the job with a manager I had worked for previously, essentially my mentor, and then they fired him. You know, so a lot of his management style I had adopted, so I had essentially worked with, I talked to the chairman of the commission and gracefully said, well, if you didn't like Ed, then you probably won't like me. The interesting thing was the chairman of the commission, I got along with him great, even though he was like this with my former boss. They never saw eye to eye, and eventually it was to the manager's demise. It was a personality conflict, and I didn't have that same personality conflict with the chairman, but at the same time, I would have had I moved up. And plus at that time, it's like every time you move jobs, you're like, okay, I'm ready. And then when you get into where you are, you're just thinking, maybe I'm going to wait a little while and learn more. So that was really the reason I think I may have had that opportunity. I wouldn't say that for sure that would have been offered to me, but after talking to the county commission chair one-on-one, we decided that we wouldn't do that.
Sounds like you made a good choice.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I really do.
Background, yeah.
Sometimes I wonder if what could have been, because he ended up running for the General Assembly and won, so he didn't end up staying, so he left. And we got a couple of new folks, which have been a blessing. Our commission is. We have a really good commission. It's just like I said, we got some problems we gotta deal with. That's the story.
On the topic of raising taxes, there's the option of raising taxes, and there's also the option of raising rates for city services such as water, sewer, electricity, waste disposal, and things like that. Do you think in the climate of people being anti-tax that it's more feasible for local governments to raise fees for services, almost run them like an enterprise and just say the sewer division needs to pay for itself, water needs to pay for itself, and do you think it's more justifiable when you're talking with the public to say, our numbers are open to you guys, here's how much it costs to run the water system, so we're not paying for extra frivolous things out of this, we're just making the water system break even so that we don't have to lay off policemen or something.
You're talking exactly about a dilemma I face right now, and that's sanitation fees in the city. The city of Elizabethton has been subsidizing sanitation with the general fund, and it's not run as an enterprise fund. And that's one of the big reasons why we're facing a financial crisis today. And I do believe that probably I was talking to Sharon Lawrence at MTS this morning, and she's saying that probably by the beginning of the next fiscal year, most likely municipalities and local government will be required to run such services as an enterprise fund. But that's exactly what I'm facing right now. Well, that is the issue, really, and the problem we have.
People really don't like increases of any kind. To add to that, if it's a tax increase or a service increase, I speak for Johnson City, we get just about as many complaints either way.
I see the service increase as being something that would make, I don't know, make people be a little more efficient. It's like you don't have a choice on balancing the services you receive, the tax dollars you pay. But I have a choice to use less water, use electricity, throw out less stuff. So, I mean, it seems like in some ways you're putting the burden a little bit back on the citizens to say, hey, the city's trying to be as efficient as we can. Maybe you guys should be a little more efficient too, and then when we raise these rates to break even at least, you know, it's not gonna hurt you as bad if you just learn to shut off the light more often when you leave the room.
All people are not rational.
I want to add to the efficiency thing. You know, we went through a bad drought over the last couple of years. Of course, now we're all floating downstream with all the rain. But our water system does run on its own revenue. But when we had water restrictions and no one was buying water, we still have the same staff and the same infrastructure to take care of. That's when we had to supplement it with general revenue because of the efficiency. So a different model would be nice. You know, essentially, efficient use of water causes us problems because we have we have to find other revenue to maintain the system because it's a delivery system that has to be maintained at the same rate whether you use it every day or never. So.
I believe that those services as enterprises should pay for themselves, and I think it's a lot easier to swallow a rate increase on utilities if you can demonstrate that there's a need there, and also, are you charging, are your rates comparable to other comparable sized communities? Just to play devil's advocate though, a rate such as that, a flat rate based on consumption that you would charge typically for a utility customer, is a regressive type of revenue enhancement. Give you an example. You live next to me and you've got $1 million mansion, and I live in a single wide trailer, and we both use 10,000 gallons of water a month. We're going to pay the same amount. My ability to pay may not be as great as your ability to pay, but we pay the same amount. Whereas a property tax is a more equitable tax, that is, your property is valued more. Obviously, you could, if you own that bigger house, more valuable property, chances are you can probably afford it better. But you know, two people going to the store to buy a loaf of bread, they pay the same amount for that loaf of bread. Obviously, you can't get into charging for other commodities based upon someone's ability to pay. But I'm just saying that is something you need to take into effect of a fairness factor when you're looking at rates that need to be adjusted. But on all things being equal, yeah, I think that's user charges and impact fees and user fees are where governments are looking now for revenue as opposed to the general property tax.
Well, trying to look at this recession in a positive light, I do know that with construction, a lot of private companies are having to go into the public sector now because they're not getting loans for construction in the private sector. And I know if like people were, you know, your capital improvements, have you all seen maybe like, I guess, people bidding just in order to keep their businesses afloat at a lot lower price than they normally
You can afford
would?
to build anything now, it's time to build.
But are you just running into the fact of just not having the budget to do the capital improvements? I mean, because there are a lot of improvements that need to be done with everyone knows our infrastructure is old, it needs, it's time, we need these things. But I mean, with it being a recession, it's also, you can get these things done at a cheaper rate than you could have without it. Like, is anyone taking advantage of that, or is it just there's the lack thereof of revenue to even think about doing any capital improvements?
I would if I had the money, but I don't have the money.
Well, with the stimulus program, it has created and assisted in new construction and new jobs through just that very method you're talking about. When those funds come down, then some projects are required to have contractors bid on them, and there's a lot of people crossing over from the private sector into the public sector just because there are no private sector construction or any kind of projects going on, because they can't get funding.
And they're pretty much just trying to keep their business afloat and eating the costs now, just to stay.
Pretty much.
There's also another side to that, and where the interest rates and monies are at an all-time low. You can, with good strategic planning and good long-term looking at capital management, you've got to invest in your infrastructure. I mean, you can't let the road completely deteriorate, then you lose people and you lose tax dollars. So, that's something that, this wasn't overnight. You have long-term planning and short-term planning, but, you know that, okay, X road is going to need to be resurfaced in 5 years. How are we going to do that? I mean, that's what they do. And so there is, there are some things that's happening. We just did a unprecedented $41 million bond issue in Kingsport. And it's for different improvement projects, different road projects, different, it's infrastructure, different, there's a ton of different things in that that's going to be used for. So again, going back to your question, yes, there are businesses, that are bidding on things, and everybody needs to stay in business right now that can. However, reality check, not every business that goes in business is going to stay in business. That's supply and demand, laws of economics. And, that's, cream rises to the top, and there are going to be some that fail. And it's going to allow the ones that survive to continue to survive. It's not our decision to choose who succeeds and fails, but to be able to help them.
I understand that. Pretty much what I was asking is, are you all taking advantage of the fact that you do have this price increase, and you do have the fact that these people are willing to do these projects at a lower rate than normal due to the recession?
Yes.
When we do have a failed, we do know that we have a lot of infrastructure problems. Are we taking advantage of this one positive thing that we have in the recession at a local government standpoint? It's negative for the people that are having to compete like this, but the fact is, you can get things done at a lower cost than you could before.
One thing I want to add to that is we receive stimulus money for infrastructure improvements through the Water Sewer Department and the Public Works Department for street light improvements and water sewer line improvements. So as part of that requirement of receiving those funds, we're required to bid out the jobs, and we're required to take the lowest bid. So
is it not the lowest and best?
lowest and
bid?
best qualified.
Yeah, it has to be a qualified bidder.
But we're required, so that kind of leads into what you're talking about.
Oh,
There's Build America bonds. We use that for the higher education in the village buildings. So that's another, yes, in taking advantage of what's going on.
We haven't cut any of our capital spending. As a matter of fact, we've been doing more. That was a conscious decision to reduce services and operating and stay with capital, because we were behind on capital over the last 10 years, and now we're getting wide-eyed. We had an estimated $22 million building come in at about $16.5 million.
Wow.
And then
So,
you start thinking, what can we do with that extra amount that we
You
had
know,
budgeted for
and,
something else?
you know, we haven't done a bond, you know, or we have a very good bond rating for county our size. We've done a lot of work with policies and, procedures to please rating agencies and gotten our rating up, so we're borrowing at a low rate. So we're, you know, unfortunately, we're taking it out on the employees is a big place, you know, with furloughs, and they're paying more for their insurance, so it's a net loss for everyone, including me.
No pay increases.
None. You know, not filling vacant positions, sometimes after they've gone, going back and eliminating them. But we're staying, for the time being, we're staying with the capital.
It's also producing, in some ways, not always, more efficient. I mean, you've got one person doing the job of two. There's pros and cons to that, but it's like,
Yeah.
like he said, I mean, it's coming back on the operating as opposed, for us, as opposed to the investments and because we're eventually gonna come out of this. You can't stop because, you know, you don't like the way things are right now. But if you're dealing with dire crisis situations, you have to address those. I mean, I'm not saying that not everybody, you know, is in the same situation.
You can hold your costs down too by investing today in new technologies too. There are a lot of technologies out there that weren't available years ago that can, why do you have to pay 2 or 3 people to stand at a window and take a water bill when you can, wouldn't it be convenient to go to your locality's website and do direct bank transfer to, from your bank account for your water bill? That saves the cost of having an employee there. It saves the cost of postage of running that meter out. There are, for those that can afford it, there are some water systems now that, instead of having to send 2 guys out on a truck and lift up the lid and manually read a water meter, some of these systems have radio control transmitters that put a tower up on put a receiver up on a cell phone tower, and it's real-time consumption of that water meter, and that saves the cost of, that's an initial upfront expenditure, and those that are able to make expenditures now in that kind of technology, I think they're going to see when we come out of the recession, they're going to be leaner and meaner, and they're going to have been able to not have, they're not going to be as impacted by cutbacks in personnel as those that just choose not to fill positions for a while.
That's a really good point.
I know in Johnson City, every person who has retired or left, the past 2 years, they have not filled a position. It's on a case-by-case basis as to, they determine if there is a true need or somebody left can do the position. I know in our department, we went from a staff of 5 to a staff of 2, and we received more funding and more grants and more work to do, but not necessarily the staff to do it. So that seems to be a trend that I'm sensing.
The turnip is running out of blood.
Yeah.
I would say that's also a trend in the private sector, so no one has any
Yeah, I
sympathy
think
for us
you're
at all.
Right, yeah.
So,
It's common.
it's, you know, every,
Speaking of not having any sympathy, it seems as though even though we can look to the horizon and see that things will be getting better, about the time we get there is going to be when some of the government regulations really rein in, specifically the EPA and their air, and a lot of this region is most likely going to be deemed non-attainment, and that will have some interesting consequences on economic development and how we do things. How do you anticipate responding to that?
Actually, Sullivan County, Kingsport, Bristol was rated as non-attainment or a few years ago. And there's a process that you go through that they come in and they give you, okay, meet these 3 categories and do X, Y, and Z. And you're not in attainment, but they don't call you as non-attainment. It's kind of a qualified.
Yeah, we've kind of been
Deferred
in
status.
for a little while, and then everyone was able to appeal, and so now it's in a review process. so to
Actually,
speak.
we're, Sullivan County, Kingsport, Bristol is now in non-attainment
Mhm.
until which there has been new regulations and that sort of thing, and when that kicks in, it's going to be interesting to see how we address those opportunities. The other part that's often overlooked to that question, or in the regulations, is your big businesses that emit these things. There is a cost to them to meet the regulations. The government doesn't pay that cost. The company does not absorb that cost. So be it a product or a service that they produce, your consumer absorbs that cost. So, you know,
Mhm.
there's pros and cons, but it can have, you know, it can put a company out of business.
A discussion that I was involved with one of the big players up there said that they were not going to take the next step to make it one bit cleaner until it was absolutely necessary, because it was a very expensive piece of equipment, and they were unsure if it would even be 100% compatible because it could actually damage some of the stuff.
And what's interesting is a lot of the regs and regulations, even though they've been issued, the finer details, just about with anything, it's almost like a moving target. It gets refined. I won't say daily, but we'll say weekly would be a pretty safe bet. I mean, these things get refined. So from, you know, economic development perspective, that's your city managers or county managers might have a different take on
And you
that.
also have your policy side of it, is what kind of policies you're going to be making to respond to these things, to control your private businesses that you have that are contributing, and citizens that are contributing.
Well, in terms of how it's going to impact economic development, I know in Virginia, well, I'm sure anywhere else, states have to compete with other states for, try to bring industry or large employers in. And so when you've got a potential large employer going to make significant property improvements and increase your tax base, everyone wants that person. Everyone wants that company. They're going to be playing one against the other for the best deal. They're going to be comparing how, while you have these federal regulations, there is some interpretation and some flexibility on the state levels. Various state departments may have some leeway on how anything beyond the minimum requirements, federal requirements. Permitting processes are going to have to be, you're going to have to be ready to when Bethlehem Steel knocks on your door and wants to come to your locality, you better know that day what it's going to take to get them an air permit, how long it's going to take, who you pick up the phone, who you call, and I think that goes back to just, you know, keeping your contacts, keeping your networks open. But you're going to need to be aware of what the environmental impacts are. Very few local governments are going to have their own environmental engineer on staff, so you've probably got consulting engineers that you'll be working with a lot of consulting engineers at the time. Make sure they have an environmental component to their business, not just civil, but also an environmental component as well. Make sure they know what it's going to take.
I was wondering if you could tell us about how many hours a week you guys work, and whether if you see your professional roles as a job or more of like a lifestyle.
If I tell the truth, you'll all run.
More than 40 hours, I'll guarantee you
Yeah.
that.
So, depends on what time of year it is. Grant writing season, 60 hours a week easy. Take work home, there at 9 o'clock at night. It depends, it's cyclical. Depends on what's going on. Somebody comes in and wants a report on the impact of this group over here by tomorrow at 8 AM. Then you drop everything and that's what you do for however long it takes.
Flexible and shoot from the hip. I mean, you never know. You know, I had a planned business trip, and it's been planned for 6 months, and had to go through all the proper procedures to get approval and travel money, and the day before the trip, oh, XYZ company is coming into town, and you need to be here. Well, okay. When will they be here? Oh, they'll be here in 2 hours. Pick them up from the airport, make sure that they're treated nicely in their accommodations, and get these 10 people together to take them out to dinner and tonight, and tomorrow 6 a.m. Mr. Joe likes to take a run, and he would like somebody to run with him, because that's when he likes to do business. Well, I don't run. I run my kids here, there, and yonder. And 6 a.m. to run 5 miles, I gave that up when I was in the Army. So, I mean, you have, you know, yeah, you might be able to sleep in and come in late at, 9 o'clock in the morning on one day, but that's very rare.
It's always that all the job that you all have requires, working a lot with people, and you have to have people skills. And I mean, it's not a job for everyone. As someone mentioned earlier, you can have thin skin in this kind of job. But in terms of leadership skills, what skills do you think are more important for this job in terms of leadership?
I think you have to be part, I think you have to be part sociologist. I think you have to know a little bit about human psychology, about sociology, how groups work, operate. You have to develop a sense of patience. I told a class this morning, it's not the kind of work for a knee-jerk reactionary. You have to make some really hard decisions, and since you're the lightning rod for the organization and the one who's most likely to be quoted the next day in the paper, make sure you got your facts straight. Sure you've listened to all sides of an issue.
They never print them right anyway.
No.
Whether you got it straight or not.
Yeah, if you got a small newspaper, if you can write a press release for them.
Give it to them before you say it. That's the way I do it.
That leads me to a question that I've always wanted to ask a group of people like yourselves, and I guess I'll pose it to all 5 of you. You've all had a number of years now since your graduation from this program to reflect on your education here. And I'd just like to know, what do you feel we should have taught you here that you didn't get and had to learn somewhere else?
There's one thing.
Yeah.
You can go to school and you can learn knowledge, but you can't be taught wisdom. And that's only acquired through living. And it's knowing people. That's one thing you'll never learn here. And that's probably one of the more valuable assets you'll have that's just needed for a job like this.
I'm kind of different. I already worked for the organization, and they approached me about getting my master's degree, which they paid for. And then I wrote myself a job, so. I had an advantage of already working there, knowing how the organization worked, who to go to for what. In fact, for my master's report, I interviewed people who already worked there and quoted them as references in my report. The only thing I learned through the program was that, and that's probably why I'm still in this position, is that I really never want to be a city manager. And that is because below city manager, you pretty much have job security. If you're city manager, 3 commissioners don't want you there anymore, and you're gone no matter what you do or if you've done nothing. So That's just a little tidbit to keep in mind.
I would say just, I guess I got lucky with my internship, but don't just think you're gonna get lucky because, that was the most important part. I mean, if you come out of your internship with nothing, then you'll get nothing out of it. I mean, it was, I was able to cultivate a relationship with a really seasoned administrator who became my mentor and a good friend, and he, if it wasn't for him, I would have missed out on the last 2 jobs that I worked. So, and I worked he didn't pay me a dime that first 6 months. I mean, I just worked for him. I drove, I was in Wise County. I was living in Johnson City, so I was driving 70 miles one way to work every day for free. But it really paid off. So I wouldn't say there's anything I missed out, but I would say that was the most important part of my education here was these guys getting me out, to see how it really worked, And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think one thing that, in hindsight, that if I could have had just maybe an intro course in civil engineering, if you deal with a lot of public works projects, and I hate to admit, I was in about my 3rd job, and I've been in the career for a long time, and I just happen to be very trustful of my public works director that I could confide in him. But one day I pulled him aside and says, "What does a manhole really do?" And I've been been submitting grant projects and writing grant projects for water and sewer lines, and we need so many manholes, and I'd see them at job sites, and I didn't know what they were for, and as much as you deal in development and infrastructure, maybe some basic civil engineering, if it was around back in my day, GIS would have been terrific to have had some background in, but that technology wasn't around back then.
Well, I have a little bit different take. I have the master's in public management, but I focus more on economic development and planning. I can do city management, but, and I may do that someday, but I'm comfortable in the skin I'm in where I'm at right now. In the economic development profession, they come from all walks. I mean, ex-cop, ex-realtor, all different walks. And so from the College of Business, in having my business degree, marketing management and finance, that has been invaluable. And then coming into the MPA program and getting the public sector side of things was kind of my ticket in, because I apologize if I offend anyone, but it is not customary to let a white, under 40 female into the good old boy, been there forever doing economic development organization. They don't do it. Female, period. I said white. Female, period.
So make that
We
any color.
don't, that's what I said. I said white, but female, period. You
We'll be
just
in there
don't
too.
get in. So, that has been invaluable. One of the comments I made earlier to a group I was talking to is my marketing. Be you a city manager, be a county exec, grants, any form of public government that you are in, you are selling something, and you need to know how to sell. You need to have, and just to say, well, I could put together a marketing plan or whatever, but have some knowledge of your community and how to sell your community, that has been invaluable. As far as a suggestion for the program, something that I've thought about since I've been out is some sort of mentor. I know that there's an internship, and I know there's return to classroom and that sort of thing, but maybe a pairing up mentor type thing.
Alumni network.
Yes, the alumni network and being able to have them. The other thing is, we are very fortunate to have someone on staff that their sole purpose is to research grants and do grant writing, but not every organization has that. And so maybe some sort of, not just a broad stroke, but even a task type class in how you research a grant, how you write it. I mean, because it is an art in itself. and you know, because there are grants out there that has to have certain specifications, and as a city manager, you're like, well, why can't we get this grant? Well, we got to do X, Y, and Z over here. Well, what does that have to do with it? And so to have some kind of familiarization with that, I think would be beneficial. But I would not have the position, the experience, the mentors, and the job that I love to do if it was not for those in the College of Business, those in the MPA program, and that interaction of local government and kind of getting you out there with the internship and that sort of thing. It wouldn't have happened at all. Dr. Marchione's gone, but I will tell you, if you don't know your advisor, get to know them. Before I was in the MPA program, when I was still working on my bachelor's at the College of Business, I went to Dr. Marchione and Dean Garceau and said, I want to do X, Y, Z, can you help me? Went to Dr. Felker and so get to know them, because they can help you. The wisdom and the knowledge that they have is invaluable. You're here, you need to take advantage of it. A lot of people don't realize that here I am 4 years later, and I know that I can pick up the phone and call one of them and say, I need a letter of recommendation. And they don't have to say, now, who are you again, and when were you here? So.
If I could just take a minute. I'm the prodigal son. I left Tennessee and we both lost a mutual friend of ours, graduated with this program. So I really, for the first time in 19 years, I'm without a job, and it's really helped me to be asked to come to this group today and speak to you, and I feel very honored and feel pleased to be asked back. But this profession is a lonely profession. If you work in a small enough place, unless you work in a big place where you're faceless, you go out to eat with your family, somebody's going to come up while you're trying to enjoy your night out and talk to you about pothole, street light being out. You go into mom and pop store to shop on a Saturday because you don't have enough time during the week to shop. And you go in, and while you're in their store, they want to tell you what a bad job you're doing as town manager. It's very important to, no one who's ever done this kind of work can really understand what it is. It can be very, very rewarding if you've got the right mindset. But you're usually the only one in your community. You're the only city manager in the city you live in. There are a lot of bankers, there are a lot of doctors, there are a lot of lawyers, but you're the only city manager. You're a very rare breed. You have to keep a professional arm's length away from your staff. Be careful about over socializing because you can't go out and have a few drinks with them and then turn around the next day and have to gig them on a performance review. It makes life difficult. So that's why, to me, I'm always more at ease when I'm around my other colleagues. I'm not that impressed when a council member comes up and says, hey, I like what you did. Well, you don't know what the hell I do, really. But I've got a lot of friends in the profession, in particularly in Virginia, and you know, when we get together at a conference or get together and you talk and share the problem, you find out you're going through the same thing they are. But you know, when we have that mutual respect for each other, your colleagues, you're going to find it's going to be very important to you later in life to become a manager. So stay in touch with each other, and as you get out, learn from older managers that are going to be retiring. You're going to be filling their space someday. And one of the dear friends I've got is Jack Gross, who is a graduate of this program. Jack's retirement age now, but when I left one job, I convinced council to bring in Jack as an interim manager, as a circuit rider with ICMA now, and to work with me for a couple of weeks before I took my other job, and really got to know Jack and to learn the perspective of a manager who's been doing it for 30-some years. I really wish at that point in time in my life I spent more time with him, because he had a hell of a lot of knowledge, just some common sense from being in the trenches. So keep in touch with each other. Keep in touch with your alumni. We'd love to see alumni programs developed out of this. So,
I want to say I'm thrilled to see so many females in here. I counted 12. When I graduated, there were 10 of us. There were 10 people in my graduating class and 2 females. So I'm ecstatic to see so many females.
pretty amazing to see more than 10 in general. Too.
I know.
Any further comments, questions? Well, I'd like to give our panel a big round of applause. We've heard a lot of very serious talk today, and the gravitas level is very high. I'd sort of like to end with on a lighter note. There was a city manager in Kingsport a few years back, Jim Zahner, and Jim was a very hard-working city manager. He worked 80-hour weeks without thinking too much about it, but he also had a sense of humor. At TCMA meetings, after a few beers, he would share that with us. And one of the stories he told when he was just starting out in the profession, he was, I think, assistant city manager in some coastal town in South Carolina. They had a character in town everybody called Tutti Frutti. He'd sort of wander around and sort of sidewalk superintend all of the public works projects that were going on in the little town. And one day they had a big water main burst in the middle of an intersection. The workmen were down in this gigantic hole sort of digging the thing out, and Tutti comes along and says, "What are you doing down there?" And the foreman, sort of winking and nodding at his fellow workers, says, "Well, Tutti, we're digging this big hole so we can put all the bastards from this town in there." Tutti looks around and says, "You're gonna need a bigger hole." And with that, we'll conclude these proceedings. Thank you.
There's certain